All right, guys, we are back again with the Pat Stedman podcast interview series. And today I have a very, very special guest, Lopez, men's marriage coach. And I got to say, before we jump into this, Joel, I'm just looking at my hair. I got like this piece of hair sticking out. It's like crazy. Before we jump into this, Joel, I just want to say I really like you've blown up so big. I really feel like you're making a big impact. I've been hearing tons of stuff from you, really doing a great job of helping guys with their marriages. So I'm really excited to do this. I'm really excited to find out more about your story. And yeah, man, please just jump right in.
I appreciate it. I've actually been tweeting for a good, I don't know, like right before the pandemic, 2019.
Mhm.
So that's kind of when I started tweeting, and I came to Twitter just because I watched the Joe Rogan podcast with Hotep Jesus, and he talked about how great Twitter was, and I'm like, I, I'm a little bit like older, so social media to me was just kind of like, oh, that's like for kids or whatever. But he was like, oh, social media is great, and I liked him because he was funny and he was on Rogan. So I was like, let me check this out, and I had this idea of doing a podcast, and that's basically how I got connected, and then in being in these spaces. Um, I'm a faith guy, but I like to like mess around a lot too.
Mhm.
So I was just building relationships with people, and it was like, oh, look, this person helps out with this, and this person helps out with that. Like you do the dating and relationships. It's like, well, where can I throw my hat in? And I had an interview with Tyler Tote, and he was, it's like I'm not the guy that's going to help you like get jacked. I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy that's going to help you make like 50K a month. Like I'm not that guy. But I've made a marriage work, and I've made it work for a long time. And I see a lot of breakdown in that, and I see a lot of degradation of marriage. And so, well, this is where I can throw my hat in. I mean, part of it is because I have kids, and so it's like, well, what? It's great that I have a great marriage, but what are my kids going to be stepping into? And so it's like, okay, well, it's time to kind of get off the sidelines and get into the arena. And to be fair, though, I have been raising kids for the last. I still am, but we've been in like baby making season for a while, so it's like that's where our attention has been and focusing, and now that they're a little bit older, it's freed me up to do some other things. So uh but I appreciate that, that that people like you are noticing. And on a side note, you just helped me this morning. I had to go and tell my wife this. So I listened to the interview with you and Tyler, and you guys were talking about how for women, when they have kids, like that becomes their like attention. And I remember having that specific conversation with my wife. It's like, hey, when the babies come, like you have to remember that I'm the priority, right? I was very aware of that. She's a good woman. The baby depends on her, needs her. I get it. But you made the analogy that the same thing is true for men and work.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh man!" Like I literally like got done watching that podcast, and I went to the kitchen and I told my wife that, and she was like, "Yep, that's so true." So that was a blind spot for me.
Yeah.
And it's a big one because for a man, like being able to provide and all that, like it's kind of the same analogous to the for the women and the children, like that. Like if the kids aren't doing well, like she takes that personally, that if she's getting criticism for that, if I'm not providing well, like I take that personally. So huge just off the bat, thank you for that, because that was big for me just this morning, man.
No, no, for sure, for sure. I mean, when I found out about that, that was like a huge breakthrough for me
Hmm.
too. And I think the first time I even heard it, I think I got it from. It's been a while now, but I think I got it from David Feldman when he came on my show.
Oh, okay.
He said something to that effect, and I was like, "Huh, it's very interesting." Because as guys, we don't really introspect so much as to like we're always looking at women, and we're
Hmm.
looking at what women are responding to and what women do that affects us. And it's interesting just to kind of build on what you were observing. men feel like that providing is often like enough. It's like, well, I'm
Mhm.
providing. Why does that not make me a good enough, attractive enough man to you? Whereas women have that same belief when it comes to like taking care of the kids. It's like, well,
Mhm.
I'm taking care of the kids. Why is that not enough for you?
Mhm.
And we're like, of course it's not enough, but it's the same thing that she feels. Uh, yeah, it's interesting how guys really throw themselves into it. I,
Well, for us, in my marriage personally, it's more of like a boundaries issue where it's like work can be like I said I was going to be done at this time, and then now it's like bled through, and you're, like you said you were done with work. I was like, well, I'm working. It's very important. But the same thing is true with the kids, because for us, I have 5 kids, and so for us, it's everything is for the kids. Like, well, we're gonna do this for the kids. Is it gonna help them? Then the answer is yes. Well, we just had a meeting, my wife and I. It's like, well, they're kind of dictating our schedule now. We're too busy. And so we're dropping the ball on these other things because it's for the kids. And so it's like, well, we're actually going to pull them back from certain things because we're too busy. But it's that same thing. Like for me, it's like, well, I need to work extra because we need it for, this and this. And it's like the same thing with the kids. They need this thing or they need to do this activity because it's going to build them up. Our goal is to have, strong, independent, loving, kind kids, that whole thing. So it's like, okay, well then yeah, but it's like, well, at what cost? And we've overextended ourselves for that. And having those realizations are the things that kind of keep us on track for our marriage for us. And so yeah, these are all like recent revelations for us.
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting how the dynamic evolves. Like there is a quote I've been reading a really good book recently. I think it's probably I'm curious if you know about it. It's probably one of my favorite books that I've read in the 8+ years I've been doing this. Called Passionate Marriage.
Hmm.
And man, I mean, every chapter is just a gold mine. But he has these little quotes, and I just threw one of the quotes up on Twitter last night, by some like humorist 100 something years ago,
Hmm.
that women, when a woman marries, she exchanges the attention of many men for the attention of one. I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
that's like, I showed that to my wife and she like burst out laughing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, and I don't think guys realize it. Like the manosphere is so fixated on, it's so solipsistic, right?
Hmm.
It's fixated on the male experience. Everything revolves around the male experience, and we don't think about what it's like for the woman.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I definitely want to get into your background and stuff as well. And sort of, I understand you got into Twitter, from Joe Rogan, and seeing the kind of potential here, and you leaned into this area that you've really mastered. I mean, having 5 kids in particular, that definitely requires strong level of mastery, because every new obligation, responsibility you throw into a marriage, like it's kind of like a weight. Like the marriage has,
Hmm.
how much weight can the marriage carry?
Right.
And every child is another weight. So any sort of unstable foundation starts to crumble. So
Right.
with all that, I mean, tell me a little bit about what you see, both from your own experience and from, I presume, you're working with clients and stuff. What do you see guys doing that leads to breakdown in a marriage?
I think speaking from personal experience, the big breakdown for a lot of men, and just people in general, is that they think that their wife sees things the way they see things. So I'm working with someone right now, and I'll kind of go down and kind of break things down. So whenever we'll say he gets some stimuli, he thinks about it first, and then he thinks about it some more, and then he takes action. So that's kind of his process, his top three. His wife thinks about it, and then she feels about it and feels about it. So it's like, why? I think she's crazy. It's like, no, she's not crazy. She just feels, and his feelings come like way later.
Mhm.
And so it's like, why are we missing each other? So there's this kind of analogy of like, if you're hunting, you want to make sure that your spouse isn't on the other side and you're both trying to shoot, because you could, in effect, hit the target, but there's a chance that you can miss and wound each other. So you
Mhm.
want to make sure that you're shooting from the same direction. And so I think, that them people will have conflict because they're not uniting, and they're not united in where they're at, but also when there is um dysfunction, or some kind of like, someone gets done wrong, grace is everything. Like, your wife is going to disappoint you. She's going to do things that are going to upset you. You have to extend grace. And part of understanding like where she comes from and how she processes things, it's like, okay, she's not trying to blow the budget on purpose. She's trying to buy something for my kids,
Mhm.
but I'm mad because she spent money that I had, for some other goal. I'm mad about it. Okay, well, she's trying to take care of my kids. Okay, I can understand that. She thinks this way. Okay, cool. Let me go and fix it, and take a top level approach from it, and kind of plan for these things that kind of happen. All right, cool. Now we're good. But um yeah, I think that's the big thing is we see the world the way that we see it, and we think that people see it the same way. And it's like, why can't you see this? It's like, well, you're wired different, brother. Like, she's wired different. That's why you married her. She's covering the things that you can't see. And this is why you guys work well together. But that's also why there's conflict or dysfunction, because you guys are coming at it from different angles.
Mhm. So how do women usually come at it compared to guys?
I usually work specifically with men because it's like, yo, like, you can't we can't change how she feels or she acts. All we can do is work on you, and then go from there. But for the most part, what we see is that the women kind of are higher up on the feelings, and the men are like thinking in action first. And that's kind of, you know, the majority of what I'm seeing. That's kind of where it comes across in most marriages anyway.
So how do you bridge the communication between the man and the woman?
So that's a great question. So it's figuring out what each one needs. So, for instance, one of the languages is a feeling language. It wants to be heard and understood. And then, like, for me, eh, I don't want to hear what your story was. I just want you to just admit you're wrong and done. I don't want to hear your excuses.
Mhm.
Well, when my wife comes to me and she wants to be heard and understood, and I'm not trying to hear it, she's not feeling that.
Mhm.
And so I have to understand that I need to be patient and listen. And then once I can feel patient and listen, it's like, okay, I understood that you weren't trying to, you know, upset me in any way, but you just need to say your piece. Okay. And this is something that I continually have to work on, because I know this about myself. That's like, you're going to tell me your stories. Like, I don't want to hear it because I can't stand like hearing complaining. And with kids, it's even more so. So like this stuff applies to like all of like your whole family. So I have a kid that's like, he does something, and then it's like, he wants to tell me his story. It's like, dude, I don't want to hear it. I got to cut him off. It's like, I'm doing that to my kid. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that to my son. So, okay. It's like the ultimate personal development, right? It's like, I have this relationship with my wife, but then also each of my kids, they're all different. And I'm having to constantly draw from a well of, what does this kid need? This kid needs me to be like active with them. This kid needs just me to sit with them. This kid wants to sit on my lap. This kid wants to just go ahead and like make jokes. Like, they're all very different. So you constantly have to. That's why I focus on the man first, because like, once you understand how you operate, once you understand what you need, you fill up your cup, and then now you can start pouring into your wife and the kids.
And can start, yeah, exactly, and can start to lead, and you only really lead, like, I think a lot of guys, because they don't know what their own needs are, that then they kind of unconsciously come out in a desire to control other people's reactions.
Hmm.
So, wife's emotional, you freeze her out, or, you get defensive. Kids get, upset or get, a little wild. it's like it's immediate to anger.
Mhm.
Um, and because we're not grounded enough ourselves, we can't almost take a step back and see, where is this emotion actually coming from, and what do they actually need? Like, I'll tell you an anecdote. I'm writing, almost done an email on this, but I have two children, very, very, very young. The oldest is about just shy of 2.5. My daughter, and she's been, it's terrible twos. She's just, a lot of, I want a cracker, a cracker. It's like, give her a crack. No, not that, like, what the fuck, like absolute, absolute insanity. Um, but what I was noticing is, especially in the evenings, it was like she really like didn't want me. And, like I admit it kind of hurt a little bit, but I was also like, okay, she's a little kid, whatever. Like, I'm not gonna take this kind of stuff personally. But when, my wife had to put down our son, who's like just about like 5 months, right? Sh my daughter, of course, is really upset. She wants her mom. You have this kind of period of separation where the mom's with the son, and she's like, "No, dad, I don't." She didn't want me. Didn't want me. Didn't want me. And I could kind of like feel this sort of frustration. I was just like, "I'm going to give her to my mom, who lives with us." And I was like, "Fine, you deal with her." Like, just, and then I realized, I'm like, well, first off, I'm definitely getting triggered by this toddler's behavior. So I gotta like take a step back and look at this. And I was thinking like I'm assuming that I'm personalizing, even though I'm saying I don't take it personally, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
walk away. I'm personalizing her rejection. It's like, but this is weird. Why is she rejecting me like now, especially in the evenings and not in the mornings when it's just the two of us together? And so I came back into the room. And I was just reassuring her. I was like, she was upset. "No, dada, no, no." I was like,
Mhm.
Dada loves you too, and I just like, and I wanna spend time with you." And eventually she kind of relaxes a bit, and I asked her, it occurred to me, I was like, "Are you upset that I don't spend time with you during the day?" And she said, "Uh-huh." So it's like she was mad at
Mhm.
me because I wasn't there throughout most of the day. And so when like, after work, she was just pushing me away because she felt hurt.
Mhm.
If I was, like, really wrapped up in my own sort of stuff, I wouldn't have seen that. And that could have been, like, a lifelong dynamic to us of both feeling completely misunderstood, not knowing that, "Oh, okay, when she's upset, she's gonna when she is upset with you, she's gonna push you away and say she doesn't want you."
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Even though she wanted you all, that's interesting. And kudos to you that that 2-year old and that 5-month old, that was a challenging time. I remember before I had my second, it was like a few weeks before, someone was like, it's not twice as much work, it's like 5 times. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, wait, nobody told me this. And it was like, oh yeah, it's a, because ours are about 2 years apart,
Mhm.
all of them. And yeah, so that's, I'm glad that your mom is able to be there to help with that, because you have no idea, like, you don't appreciate your parents as much as you do. Is like, once you have kids, it's like, oh, okay, like, this is a whole new respect that I have for my parents and my in-laws and my wife. It's just like you said at the beginning, the added weight, it just impacts of like, what kind of man am I? Did I make the right decision with the right woman? It's like, yes, yes, yes. It's like, all right, thank you, God, that I didn't screw that up. But that's really interesting about how you're. So, do you work from home? Does she see you? Is that why it's just like, oh, daddy's working kind of thing, or are you out of sight?
Very often. I mean, she goes to, like, a house Monday, Wednesday, Friday for, like a play date kind of. It's kinda like it's kinda like, it's not like in a daycare center, but it's kind of
Hmm.
like a friend of ours, and
Yeah.
she has her own daughter and everything. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she's here, though, and so on those days, and, my work extends a little bit beyond her little daycare time,
Hmm.
she does see me. So sometimes she'll see me, but, I can't talk to her. I'm on the phone with a
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's there's probably at times where she's like trying to get my attention. I know that sometimes she's like come and tried to like get on the
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to take her away, and she's cried. So
Right.
yeah,
They
it's
don't understand. They see daddy is here. Why aren't you giving me attention or playing with me? Um, yeah, that's all they see, which, being able to recognize that, I think that's one of the cool things about like this space, things that you're doing, social media, which, I kind of alluded to at the beginning. I was like, oh, it's kind of for nerds. Like, oh no, there's like guys that are kind of trading notes
mhm,
on, how to be better husbands, better fathers, better entrepreneurs, all that stuff. It's like, well, you can really level up here. I know I've taken like just, listening to the podcast that you had with Ty, it's like, oh, that was a blind spot for me. Like
mhm,
like the work. I didn't realize that I like I knew that I did that, but it's like, oh, like that is a great analogy. That this is kind of my baby, or work is kind of my baby. Providing, that's my baby. That's the one I take care of. It's like, oh, okay, that's a wonderful thing to be self aware. Like I come from y- not that I was like a great athlete or anything, but I played sports coming up, and like one of the greatest things that you could know is like what your strengths and weaknesses were. It's like I'm gonna I'm not gonna do this thing because I'm playing in a way that's not gonna be a good position for me. So
mhm.
let's put myself in good positions. And so I think if you do that for your life and for your family, realizing where your shortcomings are, what you have to work on, and being able to take that feedback and apply it is huge.
Yeah, no, 100%, and it's the blessing of, like, actually having to think about and do this work, like,
Mhm.
that it's kind of like if I have some kinda issue with my marriage or with, in a situation like that with my daughter, it's kinda like I'm still working, you know?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think I get to still think about it, so
It
clock's never completely
it
off.
it all relates, right?
Yeah. Now I have a question for you about this. So, um, 5 kids, 2-year increments, God bless. I mean,
Mhm.
that's serious stuff. And it's actually, like, our objective too, and our kind of mindset is just gotta plow through.
Mhm.
But, I mean, I I am curious because as you said, going from, 1 to 2, under 2, especially 2 under 2, is it's a it is an exponential jump.
Mhm.
It's an exponential jump. What happens with 3 and 4 and 5? Does it at a certain point, does it kinda get easier? Do you just get
Mhm.
used to it?
3 is still another jump, especially if you do it like in 2 years. That's still another jump. 4 wasn't as bad. 4
Yeah,
was like, oh, because by then your oldest will be 6.
and will be helpful.
And then so the 6 and the 4-year-old can kind of play with the 2-year-old, so that now you kind of have them occupying themselves. Right now, like you're everything, right? I want to play with daddy. The baby needs mommy. So you're right now you're playing. I think I had a tweet on this. So it's like the first one, you're double teaming it, but you
Yeah,
don't know anything. So it's all new to you. The no sleep, all that stuff. You're you bought all this stuff, and then you realize like, oh, I don't need. I only need diapers and a bottle and a change of clothes. That's all I need, and like the stroller. Like so, you're figuring all that stuff out, like what you really need. And then the second one is a challenge because you go man to man, right? So it's like I'll take the 2-year-old, you take the baby because you got, mama's milk. You got that thing. And then the third one is a challenge now because now you got to go zone. So it's like you're constantly like passing off like who's got the baby. Like I'm gonna give you this kid and this kid's coming in, so this one's kind of like free ranging, but we're taking care. The baby needs you. And then by the time the fourth one rolls around, it's like okay, they're older, they can kind of entertain themselves. And then there was a 4-year gap between my fourth and my fifth.
okay.
So now it is amazing because uh when my wife and I got married, we were like we're gonna have 3 kids with the option of a fourth.
Yeah,
And then we exercised the option. and then uh and then the fifth kind of came along. I'll stick to it. So we had the fifth, and it's been like a huge blessing because it's like the kids are older now, so they kind of actually have the experience of having a
mhm,
baby around, and like seeing them like be so like she just took her first steps and they were pumped, man, like through the roof. It's just like it just warms your heart as a father, just like they are rooting for their sibling. to, to hit these milestones. So it's been a lot easier from like a management, but it's just, well, now it's like, okay, we need a bigger car.
Yeah.
We need a bigger house. The food bill is, like, dude, how much do we spend? Like, dang, like, all right, like, so that whole part of it is probably like the hardest part now. Um, yeah, because my oldest is, she's a girl, so she's like a little mama. She'll come and look for her and like wants to change diapers and stuff. So it's there's a few hands to help. I mean, and then we have to be very aware too. It's like, hey, she's not your responsibility. Like, be a kid. So we have to have those conversations with them, because sometimes they'll kind of think that they are responsible. It's like, no, no, your job is to be a kid.
Mhm.
Enjoy, enjoy her being a baby, like that whole thing. But um, yeah, the once you get to a certain point, it does get easier, except for you still have the late nights, the constant waking up, that whole things. But that's just kind of part of the deal with a baby.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of joy
Hmm.
same time. And no, I was just thinking about it. I mean, what you said with number 3, that does seem to me to be the real challenge.
Hmm.
And that's usually when you see people peter out.
Hmm.
Um,
Will is your mom staying there just for the baby, or is that where she's going to be able to stay? Like,
we don't know how long
long?
it's gonna be, but for the time period,
Yeah,
my parents are here, yeah.
because that's like, people are. I have a good relationship with my in-laws. I have a good relationship with my parents. Like, I wouldn't have a problem with them like staying with us. I know some people would, but it makes a big difference. Like, we have to find sitters for, because mine are kind of like local, but they're not always available, and my in-laws are out of state. So
Mhm.
like, being able to get like date nights, that's a challenge. Like, we've had 3 babysitters, and they go off to college, and so it's like, oh, we got to find a new sitter. So that's not having to worry about that, or just having the extra hands is, if every situation is different, but if they can stick around for that, like, that would make it so much easier. Because I know some people that's why they peter out. It's just, you've gone 6 years, and it's just like, you've been redlining for so long, and you just want to break. I remember, I think it was after our third or fourth, my wife and I, we had a date night, and we literally like, what are we gonna do? I don't know. And we sat in the car, just like, did nothing. It was because we were tired.
Yeah.
We were tired, so, um yeah, that, and I think that's why, like, for me now, it's like, oh, what do I want for like my kids? Like, I want to have a support system where they have a place where they know, like, hey, we'll take care of the kids. Like, you need to work on your marriage, like, because
Mhm.
God bless my in-laws and everything. They do what they can, but like, it was a lot of work, and we've done a lot of it just being my wife.
Yeah,
And so I want my kids to have an enjoyable experience, where they can feel like they can have as many kids as they want, because they know that we're going to support them. And then also, we want them to have an enjoyable experience, where it's like, oh, I can send them over to my brother or sister's house, because they're going to help too. And that was a conversation we had one time. And my kid was like, oh, you can bring the kids over to my house, I'll watch them. And I was like, oh, thank, like,
yeah,
like, you this is a long-term play, and just to see some things like that, you're like, oh, I think I might be doing all right. Like, I don't know, like, I pray for my kids, and they're going to make their choices, but it's like, I kind of hope that goes this way.
mhm.
And then, hope for the best. I pray a lot for them. But to hear that was like, oh, that really affirmed me as a daddy.
Yeah, no, family around is huge, and my sister lives nearby, and she has 3 kids of her own, but, you know, 2 of them are in high school,
Oh, yeah.
and the youngest one is, like, 11 years old.
Hmm.
She and my daughter are she's like super attached to her. So she comes
Yeah.
babysit, spends time all the time. But when one of the things that we've done is we would like maybe leave before my son, we just drop my our daughter off at my sister's for the evening and we go out. But now with the son, it's like sons with my parents, daughters with them.
Hmm.
And it's we haven't really been able we might try it again with the son with like a date night just because we tried it before, and I think it was a little too early. It was like 3 months, and
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
apparently was screaming quite a bit.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on the kid. That's the thing with, like, going back to the grace issue. Like, you can have some babies are super chill. It's
Yeah,
just like, "Oh, this is an easy baby. This is how it's always gonna be." It's like, oh, s we had some that were super chill, and then we had some that's just like, "Whoa, like, this is a lot. We can't leave this baby with a sitter. That's just we're gonna get a call, or we just can't enjoy because, we're gonna come home and they're gonna be stressed out."
yeah,
So, um, I've had a tweet where it was like, I remember before I had kids, I would see, like, a kid throwing a tantrum in the store. I'm like, dude, my kid will never throw a tantrum in the store. Like, man, I don't play that stuff, right? And I had a few kids, no issues. One kid threw a tantrum in the damn store. I was like, oh, I raised you guys all the same. You threw a tantrum in the store. I was like, I couldn't believe it, man. But it was like, it's just kid has a different temperament, man. Like, all right. So, now when I see that, like, yeah, the parenting matters and stuff, but sometimes it's just a kid. It's it. You can't, you
it,
know.
it it's so incredible to me that this concept of like blank slate ever even reached any coherence whatsoever, because like that the people who push that must have never had kids or ever been around kids. I mean, it's like you can clearly see how they have different dispositions,
Mhm.
and the nurture part is helping to develop their innate dispositions in a healthy way, and to make sure that they're getting the kind of love that they need, and of course the you know the boundaries and the discipline that they need. But it really, you do, if you want to do it right, you have to calibrate it per each child slightly
Mhm.
differently.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that's why I always tell my kids that life's not fair.
Hmm.
And then they'll be like, "Well, this kid got this." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. We're not going to talk about what this kid you got what you needed, or you got this thing, like that. That's it." So the sooner that they can internalize that message, but I also have to layer it with "Daddy loves you." Like,
Yeah.
that's always first and foremost. Daddy loves you, and then life's not fair.
Hmm.
So life's not fair. This kid got this thing. Be happy for them. That's it.
Hmm.
I don't want to hear like, "Oh, I got this." And I mean, they still they're kids, so they're gonna, be upset, whatever. They can be upset, but it's like, well, no, like, this is how it is. And the sooner you learn these lessons, it's gonna help you moving forward. And
Hmm.
I have some that'll get that they'll get that lesson pretty quickly, and some we're still working on it.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
we're
yeah,
we're
yeah.
we're on it. So, it is what it is.
Now, this is a topic I think is going to interest a lot of guys. Sex
Mm,
with
love it.
kids. How do you manage that in a marriage, especially when you have more and more kids,
Mhm.
and less and less space, and more, there's a lot more, you're a lot, like, as you gave you as an example,
Mhm.
you guys go out, you both just sit in the car because you're so
Mhm.
exhausted. So
Yeah.
so talk about sex and how couples can really keep this alive even with having children.
I think, we were always kinda consistent before we had kids, and, before we got married, my wife made it very clear about what her goal was for me. She was just like, so I always want, to make sure that you're taken care of. Um, but we still had our arguments about it, like, it's not enough, it's, too much. So we was that was still part of it. Um, I've learned that, like, the busier she would get so busy, right? Like, if you want her to be available to you, like, you have to create the space for her to be available. Like, there are literally, like, humans all over her, like, all day, right? And then on top of that, she, takes care of the house and all that. So it's like, I pay for a cleaner now. I never thought I would be, paying for a house cleaner, but it's like, I need to start taking stuff off of her plate.
Hmm.
And so the more I would take off of her plate, the more she would be available for me.
Hmm.
And so that was part of it. She's able to work, like, she doesn't she has, like, her own business, and she's kind of like able to scratch her own interests, and I support her in her interests. So I do that. I try to take stuff off of her plate, and for a while too, I was actually just like waiting for her to initiate, and she didn't like that. She's like, I don't want to have to make these decisions. You take control. I was like, all right, like that's great because I'm seeing that you're really busy like all day, and I'm not trying to like add to your list
Mhm.
of things to do. Like I want this to be enjoyable. She's like, no, just initiate, and we'll go from there. I was like, all right, don't be shutting me down though, babe. So you know what I mean? Like, if you want me, if this is what you want, because I wanted to be respectful. Like there's there's 5 kids. We homeschool too, so it's like the kids are always here. Well, we shuttle them around, but
Sure, sure.
they're always around. Um, we've tried scheduling too, and for sometimes that works. It's like, okay, this is the day that's going to happen. All right, cool. So that was peace of mind for me. But lately, it's just clearing stuff off of her plate, and then when I initiate, like she's for it. But like I'm not gonna initiate, obviously, if it's been like a long day and the baby's been crying and stuff like that. So we're pretty consistent. I mean, 3, 4 times a week is
Mhm,
probably what's average. I would like more,
mhm,
just because that's just how I am. But given the season of life that we're in, it works for us.
mhm. Now, is there like a quality decline that occurs as a result? Like, how do you on a practical manner, if the kids are all around, how do you carve out space? Because I've heard some guys, they'll have certain times when the kids are asleep.
Yeah, that's it. Well, no, you know what? Sometimes turn the TV on. Hey, go watch this thing.
Mhm,
Give us a few minutes, and we'll step away. And they're completely entertained. They have no idea. So it's like I call it like finding windows. So you got to kind of create the windows for it to be able to happen. So giving her the space where she's not so stressed out that you feel like a jerk to like want to. It's like, dude, she's in the middle of cooking dinner and the babies are crying and stuff like that. It's like, no, no, I'm not gonna do that to her. So creating those windows, early in the morning. Sometimes it's just like, wake up and 2 or 3 in the morning, like, you want to go? Like, yeah, let's go. Like, all right, cool. Um, it's just like anything is um I would kind of get stuck on I wanted things to be like a certain way, and I would get stuck on that. And if it wasn't that way, then I didn't want it.
mhm,
Whereas now it's like, you kind of get what you can when the opportunity is available. Like workouts, for instance. Like workouts for me were always once an hour at least, and you would kill yourself because I was an athlete, and that's what it was 4 or 5 times a week. Well, I'm a dad now, so I don't have time for that. So workouts now are half an hour,
mhm.
3 or 4 times a week, because that's the season of life I'm in.
Yeah,
Like an hour would have been, it's awesome, ideal, but I don't where I'm at in life right now, it's not that. So the same thing with sex. It's like, okay, 3 or 4 times a week, it's awesome. When the kids are asleep, we find our windows or we try to get them busy. The baby's down. Like, all right, let's find where we can. So I think that's probably the big thing. Is just finding your windows and just taking stuff off of her plate. And let her know that she's a priority to you and that you want to make her life better.
yeah, yeah, and I think, goes back to what you talked about in the beginning with grace, and that guys get, there's a lot of ego that comes into it. And I think this is really one of the big things with the red pill is that there's so much of a focus on it about, the guy's ego and about the guy getting everything that he wants in a given moment.
Mhm.
And well, and I think there's also like a bit of mischaracterization because they say, well, if you're accepting anything less than that, then you're settling.
Mhm.
It's like, well, no, it's being honest and actually realizing what the circumstances on the ground are.
Mhm.
They'll take situations where the woman is clearly disinterested in a guy and doesn't want anything to do with him and is making excuses. And then they'll characterize that and they'll make guys who don't have that situation believe that when, you know, their wife who's been working all day and then comes back, the two kids who have all sorts of, crying, screaming, and
Mhm.
everything. And he's also working all the time, and they're just working kids. And so she's, on one hand, probably not feeling at all connected to him.
Mhm.
Two, on the other hand, like super stressed and exhausted.
Mhm.
That's the reason that she's not having sex, or doesn't want to have it at that exact moment, because he's not thinking about that. He's thinking about, you know, what needs that he has, but he's not expressing it in like a healthy way. It just becomes this kind of festering resentment. And yeah, go ahead. I mean, I see this so often, that the red pill takes these horror stories, which I'm not saying don't happen.
Mhm.
Of course they happen, but they don't really observe what's the context and dynamics in that relation.
Right.
And then they apply it to like the standard relationship, where the real reason your woman doesn't want to have sex, and I wrote like a long blog post on this, is like about 2 years ago, is she's like absolutely stressed and exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. That really is it.
Like
Like,
like, you don't need to go talk to some, like, slut half her age and try to make her jealous. It's just gonna stress her out more.
yeah. You think about it like when guys are, want to have an affair or on the front end of dating.
Mhm,
Like you do everything possible. Like why is like I was talking to Tyler, right? And it was he goes on like a trip every 3 or 4 months with his wife and it's, just them. It's like how easy is it to have sex and do all the crazy stuff, hotel sex and all that stuff that's fun during that time. Well, it's really easy, right? Like you've cleared out everything for her, so you know, she's not mom anymore. She's just your bride, and you can do that. So you come back into real life, and it's like, well, why is it? You got to set the conditions, man.
yeah,
Like the conditions are everything. And also the situation, right? We talked about like being exhausted. Well, like after you have the baby, like dude, they need 6 weeks to recover.
mhm,
Like, are you really gonna demand at that time? Like, dude, you're being an ass. Like, come on, man.
yeah, yeah,
You love her, right? Like, you want the best for her, right? Six weeks, okay. Like, don't be a baby about it.
mhm. Do you think now, this is kind of like the springboard off that question, because I agree with you 100%. There's a good book called The Fourth Trimester that really talks about how, from a hormonal and physical and emotional standpoint, a baby's really like a year-long commitment
Mhm.
rather than 9 months.
Mhm.
And so maybe physically it's 6 to 8 weeks until she can, comfortably have sex again.
Mhm.
But, you I tell guys you should think of it from the standpoint of like the first 3 months afterwards. Not saying you don't start anything, but keep it in mind that she's like gonna have some different moods and different, her hormones are still gonna be out of whack. What I guess what I'm asking here is that, like, what do you have guys do in situations where their woman always has an excuse, though? Where she, because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about presupposes, mutual interest, even if there's a lot of stress and other stuff on top. Um, Mutual trust, even if there's some maybe, miscommunication. But what about in these situations where the woman's always kind of got like an excuse? She's always sort of pulling back from the guy, and it doesn't seem like she really is interested in having him touch, or do anything, because
Yeah.
some marriages like this.
Yeah. I usually go back and ask, was there ever a time that, it was like on, right? Like it's like, yo, like let's go, it's on. And then we kind of go back and be like, well, what were the things that you were doing then when it was on?
Hmm.
Well, I did this and this and this. Okay. Are you still doing this and this and this? No.
Hmm.
Oh, well, how about we start there? But like a real thing too, like over time, I'm guilty of this too. It's like there's like so many cuts that happen in a marriage, like of like promises that you didn't keep,
Hmm.
right? And that affects her. Like you could see like my board up here. This is like my to-do list. It's like because it's like more I knock those things off. Like these are stuff for the house that need to get taken care of. I'm not very handy at the
Mhm.
moment. I'm working on that, right? So I'm saying I'm working on it. But those are things. It's like, you know, like the Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And there's times when I said things that were going to be a yes and they ended up being a no, and that affects her.
Mhm.
I can't trust you. Whereas in the front end, you kept all those, all you were a man of your word, and whatever you said worked. And that's probably the reason why she married you.
Mhm.
You had that, or you had the potential for that. And then over time, you got busy with work. You got busy with these other things, and now, like, what you used to knock out like as a top priority is down on the list.
I think it's so crazy how guys don't see this, and I'm speaking for myself too. Like, because we'll look at stuff like we'll like, okay, yeah, yeah, it's important as a man to keep your word, but we don't. I don't think we grasp how important it is for a woman, and also how sometimes minor these things are. Because I think guys, when they think about giving their word, I think they often think about it in the sense of, how you would give your word to another man,
Mhm,
which is like there's one specific thing maybe, or like, you're going to commit your fidelity to a cause or something.
mhm,
It's sort of more, uh, it's more clear cut. Whereas for women, it's like, you're not gonna like commit to yourself to other men that, you're gonna take out the trash all the time, or you're gonna,
mhm,
these are not things that you would ever say to another man, that like,
mhm.
I'm committing myself to do this.
Yeah,
Just get out of here, dude. What the what the fuck?
yeah, yeah,
Like, I don't care about that. I just want
yeah.
you to have my back if we get into a fight. You know what
Right.
I mean?
And then the answer is always, how many can you take? I could take 3 of them, I think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like it's so I think men, when they think about I keep my word, I have integrity, they think about it from the standpoint of integrity with other men.
Mhm,
But they don't think about these little things. They're like, does this really matter? Like, it's not a big deal. There wasn't that much trash in the trash can. Like,
mhm,
easily wait till next week. But she sees it,
mhm,
and for her, it's like, I can't trust him.
mhm,
Trust him. And we could say as guys, like, this is, exaggerated
mhm.
behavior, and women shouldn't do that, but women do this.
Right. This was a problem that I had. So I'm big time thinker. I'm thinking about, hey, I want to buy a house in 5 years. I want to buy land. I want, like, so this is stuff that's going on in my brain all the time. And
Hmm.
what do? I leave my clothes on the floor because,
Yeah,
bro,
yeah.
I'm dealing with bigger issues right now in my brain. You don't know. And the trash thing, like, for sure. But that's on her to-do list. It's always like, it's there, it's there, it's there. And on top of like all the other things that she has to do, right? But it goes back to the trust, but also that to-do list and setting the conditions. If I consistently take out the trash, she doesn't have to like, the nagging is because somewhere along I dropped the ball.
Hmm.
She doesn't nag me about like, oh, you go out or you do this. It's like, hey, like, can the trash come out? Like, and my wife is super sweet. So it's like, hey, can you take out the trash? It's not like you didn't take out. No, it's like, no, can you take out the trash, please? And it's like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
that's a reminder. It's a reminder for me, but that's something I committed to because I didn't want her to take out the trash. I was like, that's my wife. Like something about like, you're my wife. You don't need to be taking out the trash. That's let a man do that. Like even my boys, I tell the boys to take out the trash, not my girls. Like, dude, take out the trash. But it's that's that trusting. It's this little thing. Like, as a man, I'm, speaking generally, right? Yeah, like, dude, I want to be a warrior. I'll die for you. All this stuff. I'll commit to that. But like, dude, can you just take out the trash? Can you do the little thing consistently? Like, that's doesn't make sense to us, but it makes sense to them, and that's all that matters, right? It's talking about feelings. Like, that doesn't make any sense to my rational, the rational side of me. It doesn't make sense, but it means a lot to her. So that's enough for me. Okay.
Yeah, and at least, and I put the corollary onto this too, because some guys will listen to this and they'll say, "Well, it's never enough. There's always something else. There's always something
Mhm,
else." And I think that the pushback with that is reasonable to an extent, but it shows that you haven't really communicated stuff well.
mhm,
So if there's some stuff that you're not going to do, you don't want to do it. So that now you have a dilemma. It's like,
Mhm.
well, are you going to make her do it?
Mhm.
Is she okay with doing it? Is she not okay with doing it? If it's another thing, if you put too much on her, especially with the other obligations she has, and she's going to get burned out.
Mhm.
So if this is something you're not going to do, are you going to pay somebody else to do it?
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Then you're still taking care of it
Mhm.
indirectly. If it's something really petty and stupid that she's trying to get you to do, first off, it's probably not about that thing. It's probably
Mhm.
about some sense of not feeling connected to you. But I also think it's important for guys to exercise a no, because so often with this stuff, like, you have all these things that you didn't do, but maybe there's also things on that list that you committed to doing that you shouldn't have committed to doing,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
Will you drop this package off today? Like yeah, yeah, sure.
Mhm.
But your schedule is absolutely there's no way you can do it.
Mhm.
But you just said okay because you wanted, because she asked and you felt like, okay, fine, I'll do it, or you weren't thinking. And then the package isn't dropped off, and she's all like, why didn't you drop it off? It's like, well, I didn't have any time. I was like, well, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You should have just said, hey, no, I can't. I can't
Right.
drop it off. I'll drop it off tomorrow, but I can't drop it off today.
Right. No, that's a good point. And I think a lot of that, we'll just say, like, because I've had that scenario, right? And it leads to an argument. Like, take out the trash. I'm watching the game or whatever. Like, take out the trash. Like, yeah, 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 yeah. I'm watching the play. It's like, if I would have communicated, like, oh, I'll take out the trash. She's saying take out the trash, and she's saying take out the trash right now.
Hmm.
And you say yeah, yeah, yeah. So she's like, oh, you're taking it right now. And then like 5 minutes later, she's like, oh, like what the hell, you say you're taking out the trash? I was like, well, in my head, I was gonna do it, at the commercial,
Yeah.
but the series was going on longer, and it ended up being 10, whatever. So if you say like, oh, cool, I'll take out the trash at the commercial or after the game, like, just set the expectation. Like, that's the big thing. So knowing, and that's kind of going back to knowing who you are, right? Are you just saying yeah, 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 so she'll shut up? Like, come on, man. Like,
Mhm.
like, this is your wife. You should respect her. So give her the courtesy of knowing who you are, so you can say, oh, like, you know what, uh either no, like you said, I can't do it because I'm jam packed. All right, so you're good on your word, or it's like, hey, can I drop it off tomorrow or at a different time, like, or I can see if I can make it. Is that cool? Is this urgent? Just having asking those kind of like follow up questions, and being clear on what the expectation is and what the expectation is of you.
Mhm. Now, I'm gonna ask a question I'm sure is in some guys' minds. Um, Given all this sort of like obligation and stuff that you got to do, why even bother getting married? You know, why go through the process of having to navigate all these little communication issues and a woman's needs and neurosis, right? When you could just see different girls and not have to deal with any of that. Or
Mhm.
you could get them to be, they could do what they want for you, but then you don't
Mhm.
have to actually do any of this stuff. So why should guys get married?
Well, I'm a faith guy, and I've kind of been that, like, my whole life. So, um, my dad only loved my mom. I only saw marriage, so I understand that that's the perspective I come from. So I knew I wanted to be a husband and a father. Uh, I'm tall, I'm dark, I'm handsome, and I'm funny. All right, it is what it is. I could have been had my choice. That's just not who I wanted to be.
Mhm.
In all honesty, it's not who I wanted to be. So I got married young. I met my wife when I was 16, going on 17. So we're over 20 plus years. This will be year 18 of marriage
Mm.
for us. So I saw my dad loved my mom. That's what I saw. Um, my uncles, for the most part, they all stayed married on both sides. My mom, I'm Mexican, so big family on that side. Pretty big on my. So that's what I saw. Um, so I had lots of cousins. I enjoyed that. brothers and sisters, like that whole thing. I was I came up, I think, in an ideal situation for family. I didn't see like uncles or whoever like messing around. I mean, and then in high school, like my buddies that they went out and chased, but it was just like, yo, like that's not me.
Hmm.
So just for some context, that's kind of where I come from, and that was like I saw for me dudes that kind of, if you go in this, you're setting yourself up for trouble, and I don't want that. I want someone who is I can build with and be for life. So like I dated very little because I didn't really enjoy it.
Hmm.
I didn't. And also like if somebody didn't have the potential to be the wife, then I would cut it off for that same reason. Like I didn't want to like get a girl pregnant who I didn't think was going to be my wife, and now I have that problem and
Hmm.
STD. So um, for me, it's just my wife is my favorite person. So we were long distance, my wife and I, so this is like the internet was like still not a thing. So I had to talk to her on the phone, and I would get 1 hour, and so 1 hour. So that's where we kind of built our relationship, just talking on the phone. I enjoyed the things that she had to say. I enjoyed her company. We would write letters, and that was all we had, and that's where we built it. It sucked at the time, but now it's like okay, like I like just being around my wife.
How did you meet her?
I met her on a cruise, man.
Mm.
Yeah. So I don't come from I don't come from money, but my grandpa would put money in an account for me, and my buddies were like, "Hey, we're going on a cruise," and I was like, "Well, I was saving that for a car, but when else am I going to have a chance to do something like this with my buddy? We're in high school. We're juniors in high school. When else am I going to have a time to opportunity to do this? So you know, let me take it." So I meet her the first night, and there's like a 7-day cruise. So every night I met her the first night, and then every night we had some time to kind of like have a date and have some fun and get to know each other. And then after it was like, well, I'm from LA, so it's like I've been around pretty girls. Like she was different,
Hmm.
and so I was like, she's worth pursuing.
And where did she live?
Northern California.
In California.
So
Okay.
yeah, so I'm from Southern California. But at the time too, it's like I'm 16.
You don't have a car or
I
anything.
can't. Yeah, I didn't have a car, so it might as well have been across the country.
Yeah. So, what was it about her that was different than other girls?
Um, like she wasn't boy crazy. So like I met like a lot of like girls liked the attention that men or boys or whoever would get, and they'd be like boy crazy. But also my wife was a dancer, like a ballet dancer, and so like she really loved that, and I really loved football. And I felt like the way that I loved football, that's what she loved. Like she wanted to be good at dance the way I wanted to be good at football. And like to me that was like super super, it's like I finally like recognized someone who was like me, but like sounds weird, but like the female version of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
also she was beautiful. Like I saw her and I was like I said, I'm from LA. Like I seen like lots of pretty girls, but I saw her like, whoa, like I need to, and I was a teenage boy, but it was like I need to talk to her. Like that was like the like I can't pass up this opportunity to talk to her. There's her beauty is something else that I haven't seen before.
Hmm.
So I think that was, and you know what's funny is she said that like she was attracted to my confidence, and I was scared. Like I don't know, I don't know. I just figured I'd just like shoot my shot. I was terrified, but she
Hmm.
was like, "Oh, you're so confident," and I was like, "Well, I'm glad you thought so, because I sure wasn't."
Relative to other guys, I guess, right?
Um, well, I think she thought I was confident because I always kind of like knew who I was. So like I said, I was always very grounded in my faith. So I pursued her, but I wasn't trying to have sex with her,
Right.
which is what she was used to, right? Like guys got like the that's the thing that women say. It's like all guys just want sex. It's like, no, I don't want you for that. I'm trying to figure out if you're a wife material, and if not, then I'm gonna move on from you.
Mhm.
And that was very different for her, and I think it's very different for a lot of a lot of women.
How has marriage changed you?
Oh man, I've had to learn how to forgive a lot. I've had to become more patient. Um, I've had to become more generous. Like I thought I was generous. Uh, but then you just realize how selfish
Mhm.
you can be. Um, I mean, it's a lot of things. Like even now, I'm still realizing things because like I said, I got married young, so I'm committed, and that was that. So like to part, like I believe all that stuff. But there's things about me that I need to fix so we can go to the next level. But those are like the three big things I think. Uh, I I'm very much the I'll hold the grudge and I'm gonna make you pay for it. And I did that in my marriage, and I'm sorry to say that,
Mhm.
but I did that. Um, so but it's not healthy at all. So having that realization that that's how I was and that's how I was operating, and I think a lot of guys are kind of like that, like, oh, you're not going to get over on me, so I'm gonna make sure that that you pay if you ever do make a mistake. Like, oh man, that is not good. So
Mhm.
that's probably the biggest actually is keeping score. Oh man, I was scorekeeper. Like I said, like I had this football mentality. What's the score right now? What's going on? Like, okay, like yeah, I know exactly what I did for you, and now you need to do for me. No, now it's just like that is not how God intended us to be to each other. That is not how God treats me. That is not how I want to treat you. Now I'm, you know, my goal is just to be giving. And if we look at our bodies, right? I am physically made to give to my wife. She
Mhm.
is physically made to receive.
Yeah.
Like once you have that, like what's in it for you, I think that's kind of like the long way of answering your question. Like
Mhm.
now it's just you need somebody to give to. That's really like I need somebody to give to. Somewhere
Mhm.
deep down, like if you kind of like pull away everything, like that's what a man wants. I want somebody who I can give to and who appreciates it and who is a joyful receiver, if that even makes sense.
Mhm.
Because like so just side note, like sometimes people will um have a baby or something, and I'll message them. It's like, hey, um, can I send you some money for the diapers? I'm like, no, it's okay, it's okay. It's like, I just like I'm just trying to be like generous to you, like just to say like, hey, like congratulations on the baby. So a lot of people will just like they don't want to take.
Yeah.
So it is actually like uh not a gift, but like a something that people need to develop is the ability to receive.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
you know, people will say like, you know, people aren't generous. It's like, well, sometimes like, well, people who are generous need people to give to, and people will say, no, I don't want. It. It's like, well, all right, cool. Like let me know like when I can, and I haven't gotten a message back of like, yeah, like go ahead. But there is something to that.
Yeah, it's a, it's really interesting that you say that 'cause that's true with anything, but I see it especially not to digress too much on a different topic, but with money.
Hmm.
I think it's one of the main reasons that people don't achieve higher levels of success is that they either they're too greedy and that creates problems because if you are only trying to take, eventually there's a reaction against
Hmm.
that. But and I think that's more people they'll get a lot and then they'll lose it. You know, something will happen or
Hmm.
something else in their life will fall apart as a result of it. But most people have a hard time receiving. And man, I gotta be honest, like with my fundraiser and everything that I've been doing for my case, it's been I view this is it's difficult. Like it's been difficult to like say that because I don't want to ask. I don't like asking,
Mhm.
like asking for help. I'm very much the kind of person who's like, I'm trying to give to other people.
Right.
I know early on with my business, that was a huge thing, like feeling like I was justified in receiving money. Like it's just this constant kind of process. And I feel like I'm getting better at it, where it's like now I can have money come to me, but then I can also let it go
Mhm.
a lot better and just kind of let it flow. Um, to kind of go back to what you're saying with the marriage itself, though, I think this brings up, God, it's like when you look at the manosphere, obviously major points for intention. You know, guys here are trying to become better. They're trying to rediscover something that's been lost and come back into it. I don't think the manosphere as a whole has progressed much beyond adolescence. I think it's going through its own initiatory experience and it's starting to move out. I think, conversations like this are part of that. Most of the guys, most of the dialogue there is still in sort of adolescent stage of development. And what I mean by that is they don't fundamentally grasp what it is to be a man. They don't want to be a simp right now, which is
Mhm.
good. You don't want to
Mhm.
be a simp. This is something that you have to go through. It's very much like uh, that adolescent stage of trying to establish your personal power in dynamics with women. But fundamentally, to be a man is to bear responsibility. And I think that there is way too much of the conversation in the manosphere rather than be about like how you what how to get yourself in a place where you can take on the right responsibility, how to pick the right kind of woman to go with you. It's very much like here's why it's too risky. Don't do
Mhm.
anything that isn't, you know, that you're not just taking from the woman herself.
Mhm.
Like don't get married because that's like the laws are all messed up. Well, a lot of laws are messed up.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's disputing that who has any kind of integrity or awareness. But the point here is like, so like you're too afraid of your own judgment. You
Mhm.
don't have the judgment to be able to pick a woman. Um, Most of the guys, I would say overwhelming number of the guys who have these horror divorce stories are guys with zero self-awareness going into their marriage,
Mhm.
zero whatsoever. Didn't know what woman they got, didn't know what they were doing in the marriage. Um, at any rate, I don't want to belabor it, but you talking about this like a man is meant to give to a woman, like she's a receiver. And there is this kind of flow. It's like you goes from God at top
Mhm.
to man, right? And a lot of the manosphere guys, they like that, right? The man
Mhm.
should have the authority. Fine. But the man also has more responsibility. And I don't want to be disingenuous. I know that's a lot of guys, their point is that why would I take on responsibility without authority?
Mhm.
Which is a fair point. Go ahead.
I never I n not that I never, okay? I didn't have to, like, ask my wife for the authority.
But you told
I
her, right? You told her, "I'd
I
like
t I
authority."
well, I did tell her because I set boundaries at the
Sure,
beginning when we were dating.
sure.
If you wanna be with me, you don't do these things.
Right.
I do not accept that. Why? Because I care about you, so this is to protect you. But she had to see in me that I was worth somebody that I was somebody worth listening to, which is a great honor because I
Mhm,
think that she's wonderful. But she followed, like, we got married and we moved out of state. She followed me. Well, obviously we were married, but like that could have been a big issue.
mhm,
So like that's why it starts with you as a man. Like you want the authority, but you haven't displayed that you are going back to taking out the trash, right? Like you want me to submit to you, you want me to follow you, but you can't do these things here and now I have to remind you about doing these things. Like that's I never have to remind God, like, hey God, like, like, this is, you need to be doing this thing, right? It's like, no, like, God is consistent. And so I love that you connected it, right? Like people love that God comes first, but then Eve came from him and then the kids, right? That is the order. But I have to me, it's I have to be that man that is worth it. And so sometimes when I'm like, I'll tell her like, hey, like why aren't you listening? It's like, well, I have to look back at me. I am the one that is responsible. God gave God gave Adam God gave Adam all those commands. He didn't give them to Eve, so he has a responsibility. That's just what it is of being a man. I'm responsible. Okay, she when Adam when Eve bit the apple, nothing happened.
Mhm.
It wasn't until Adam bit the apple that the shit hit the fan,
Mhm.
right? So it's like why? Because it wasn't he didn't give those instructions to Eve, he gave them to Adam. So it's the responsibility is on me.
Mhm.
If I am doing the things that I need to be, like, I don't have to be like, "Yo, submit to me." Like, because once you say that, then that already tells you that, like, that there's an issue. You
Yeah.
shouldn't if you have to say to submit, if like that whole thing, like, no king has to say that he's the king or whatever that quote is. Like, if you're at that point, like, you've already lost the respect. You want titles. Everybody knows titles don't mean anything. Like, if you worked in any organization or any kind of sports thing, it's like there was people who you would listen to just because of who they were. It didn't matter what their title was. Like, oh, he said so. Like, all right, like, cool. He's not the head coach, but he said so. Like, all right, cool. Like, I'm listening to him.
Yeah. Yeah, they when a guy is saying that kind of stuff, he's already resorting to he's acknowledging at that point that he's not a leader.
Yeah. Like if you were at work and then, your boss has to tell you that I am the boss for you to do something, like you already know that your boss is like full of crap,
Yeah.
right? It's like you don't know what you're talking about and now you're just trying to appeal that you're the boss to get me to do it. So now like you've even eroded whatever credibility you had even more.
And they're super weak at that point too. I mean,
Right.
like that's why they don't have any authority.
Mhm.
When a guy's saying that kind of stuff, I mean, you can expect the woman's out the door pretty soon. And this is, I think, the funny part about it. It's funny to me. I'm like
Mhm.
kind of an asshole, but it's funny to me because you have these guys who are like, I'm the alpha, and then they're looking for women to like tell them, yeah, yeah, you're the alpha, honey. It's like there's this
Mhm.
kind of they're looking for validation. It's like if she's not going to tell me I'm the alpha, then I'm not going to be with her.
Yeah, that's so
It's like, all right, I'm sure
Eh,
she's really upset about that.
you're
Uh,
so alpha that you need the affirmation, right?
yeah,
Like,
I mean, you know, it just shows, and I think that you can see this in sort of general political discourse too in the country, where you have men who are looking to women to give them approval for whether or not they actually do something,
mhm.
you know? Whereas as men, it just kind of really reveals the rot that even when men are talking about the fact that, guys got to be more alpha, they're they're still like looking like, am I doing it, mommy? Like, like it's like, yes, you are, honey. Good job. Keep it up.
Yeah.
Keep it up. Thanks.
Uh, yeah, I guess you want the appearance of it and the affirmation of it. It's like without doing the thing. It's like everybody wants to we'll just say everybody wants to be an alpha until it's time to do alpha shit, right? Like
Yeah.
y- just do the stuff. Like I always tell people, I'm a regular dude. Like I don't think I'm anything special. I'm just a dude, right? But I love my wife. I'm gonna do what I need to do to take care of her. Like that's kind of it. I don't know if part of it is upbringing. Like like my dad, I wouldn't consider him alpha. I liked football coaches who were like gruff and things like that. I like that kind of stuff. But like, dude, I'm like, if you talk to me enough, like, dude, like this guy is silly. Like you probably see it on my time. Like, dude, I'm silly. Like I don't try to be like Mr. Tough Guy. Like
Mhm.
that's crazy. Like I remember during the whole lockdowns and everything, like wear a mask. It's like, no, I'm not wearing a mask. And I remember like this guy had like this Gadsden flag and grunt style stuff, you know.
Sure.
He's like walks in and oh he runs back to his big old truck to get his mask, and me like wearing a Mickey Mouse shirt and like chanclas like walks into the store. It's like, dude, like I'm like
Yeah,
I'm not I, I'm not a little bitch, but I have little bitch tendencies. All right,
yeah,
like you
yeah.
know what I mean. Like I'm just I'm goofy, like, but it's like, dude. But when it comes down to it, like my wife knows that I have her back, that I'm gonna do everything I can to provide. That I'll stand up for the things that I believe in. I love God. I love my family. Like, and then from there, we're like, well, we'll see what happens. But like that's true. That's been me. Always been me. And I think she's recognized that. So she follows me because that's who I've always been.
But it's the difference between performative masculinity and
Mm,
and genuine masculinity. So you have a lot of guys who want to be seen as a man.
hmm
Um, and this was the whole thing, like, yeah, go out in the grill,
hmm
want to grill some steaks. You see some of
Mm,
it in the
yeah,
manosphere.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not saying it's like necessarily incongruent. I think that some of these guys, but it, like it's real, but they're also performative with it. They're
Oh, gotcha, gotcha.
you
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like I'm not
yeah.
trying to be like mean to everybody who does that stuff. I like
Mhm.
steak too.
Yeah, right. It's
Um,
delicious.
yeah, but but like to give an example, it's like, oh well, if you're a man, you got to have like cigar and you got to have
Mhm,
whiskey, or
mhm.
like it's like I like wine. If I'm gonna drink, it's gonna be wine.
Yeah,
And honestly, if I'm gonna smoke, it's gonna be cigarettes.
yeah,
like I
yeah.
mean, it's and I don't really I never bought a pack in my life, but you get my
Yeah,
point
having
here.
a good time, yeah, it's like, "Alright, you
The
got one."
point here is that like I just I just don't get like wine in particular has it's more of like a feminine
Mhm.
drink. It's like I don't give a fuck. Like you really think I'm gonna give a fuck about that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, as you said, it doesn't matter if you've got a Gadsden flag up in your yard. If you're like, the moment push comes to shove with something, you're like, yes, I'll do as I'm told.
Mhm,
Whereas, you're actually in many ways being more defiant and really expressing your masculinity more. That you go out with like a Mickey Mouse shirt. You don't care about it at all. You don't care what people try to misconstrue because it has no actual bearing on your behavior. You can
mhm.
and to a certain extent, as a result, you can pull it off.
Yeah. I think because if I think about it, I don't ever think of like, "Oh, I'm doing this to be masculine. If I'm doing this to be alpha." I just do what I think is best,
Mhm.
or to the best of my ability and my understanding. This is what I think is best. If that's, I mean, is that mask? I do my best to try and live my life according to my beliefs
Mm.
as best as I can, and that's, I think, as simply as it can be. That's probably it. Like, I love God. Yes. Do I get it wrong? Oh, I'm sure I do. I ask forgiveness for that. Like I like to talk a lot of shit, man. I like to joke. So it's like sometimes I'm like, "Oh, is that right? I don't forgive me, please." But I mean, that's just what I try to do. I try to live my life according to what I believe, and I try to include people along with it, and joke around like I'm having fun with you, like joking around. Like one of my favorite things is to like say something that I think is funny, and then like you to laugh along with me, because it's like something that we get to share. Like I don't drink, I don't smoke. Like I used to drink, but once I had kids, I was like, okay, I don't want to
Have the
drink
energy for
anymore.
that.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I was like, I don't have the energy to be able to like
Oh,
I
it
mean,
was
I'm just was just gonna say like,
yeah.
some people drink more when they have kids, but I don't
Uh-huh.
know how you can really do it because it's so much
Yeah.
weight.
I, but for me, it was like, if we kind of go back to certain things, it's I had a great example. My dad, I never saw him like touch alcohol, and we're Mexican, so like there'd be crazy parties, and my dad would never take a sip
Mm,
of anything. And it's like, well, I'd like that example for my kids. So
mm,
I was drinking. I stopped drinking once my first kid was born, and I had opportunities to drink when they're not around. But it's like, well, but I know,
right.
so I'm not going to. And maybe one day I'll have a drink again, but for the time being, It's like, okay, no. One of the other things too was I remember being a teenager and there's like strip club billboards up, like scantily clad girls. I'm in the back of the car and watch my dad to see if he looks.
Mhm.
He doesn't look. I'm like, oh, okay. That's my dad. Okay. And talking about porn, because that was what we're talking with Tyler. It's like,
Mhm.
dude, like I do not begrudge these kids these days. Like when I'm gonna be 41 this year. 41 this year. I don't know how old you are, but like you had to go get a Playboy, and if you wanted to watch like porn, you had to go to like the Blockbuster didn't even have it. You had to go to like the corner video store and go behind the curtain. So like you really had to work to get it.
And to really want
Yeah,
it.
you had to really like want it, and then like like be on the edge. I guess like 12-year-old boy trying to go behind the curtain. Like dude, they wouldn't either way. Like you had to work to get it. Now like it comes after them.
Mhm.
And talking about grace, it's like these kids are being under attack by this stuff. And it's doing stuff to their brains. And it's like, why are relationships this way? It's like, dude, like we've had over like 20 years of like I remember MTV Spring Break, that stuff was on for us. And it's like it's just gotten worse. Like that's what the kids are growing up in. Like let's give them some great, because like I've seen two people like, hey, like what's the big deal with porn? Like just don't watch it. It's like, no, man, these kids have been watching it since like 8, 10 years old.
Yeah.
Like it's got a hold of them.
Yeah. No, it's a huge rot. It's a
Hmm.
rot, and it distorts all the relationships too. Now, I mean, everybody has become so performative in every bit of interaction that they have. You
Hmm.
know, they're so anxious and they're so insecure. Um, and to a certain extent, I look at porn, especially when you have it at an age like that. I think it's I don't wanna, like, take away from people's, like, actual really traumatic experiences, but I consider it, like, it's like sexual abuse. I
Hmm.
mean, you're experiencing something that's jarring your entire sexual system, it's distorting it, and everything after that, it anchors it to a certain direction.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think it's a surprise that we see all sorts of deviancy and identity confusion. You have the propaganda, obviously, and the desire for people to fit in socially and not feeling good about themselves and looking maybe if I change my identity, I'll feel good about myself.
Hmm.
But I also think so much of this stuff, porn has become the gateway to it
If
that
you
broke that open.
if you look at it, it's really sinister on like two levels for men and women. Sex is a desire that men have for sure. It's ingrained in us, and like we pursue it. It affects that. But then for women, they have a desire. They have this desire to be desired,
Yeah.
and they get that too. So now you've set up this horror, the situation where it's like both of the desires now are being um what's the word I'm looking for, just like misused.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, like I can't trust women because
Hijack.
they're, yeah, hijacked. Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been hijacked. The desires that they have that are a good natural desires. A desire for sex is good within marriage. A desire to be desired is great within marriage. It's been hijacked now. So it's like, well, why are these women sleeping with all these men? Well, it's like they have a desire, they have this need to be desired, and they're feeling it in unhealthy ways. What is it for a man? It's like, well, I want to be, to be able to give sexually to a woman, but they're doing it in this unhealthy way now, where it's like you can kind of pick up whatever you want and get whatever you want, and now lust is never satisfied, so it keeps on going and going and going into these very abusive, very toxic places.
Mhm. Yeah, and, I think just to kinda add on to that, there is because what you said about you when you were like a child in the car and you looked at your dad.
Hmm.
I don't think that men understand how much their kids look at them,
Hmm.
how much their kids pay attention. Um, like, even with obviously porn and, if you're a dad and you're looking over at that kind of stuff and you're
Mhm.
like, that's going to affect them. It also will make them feel maybe more unsafe and uncertain. And as they get older, they respect you less.
Mhm.
But and I think that's one of the big issues, of course, with all this like libertinism. And I actually do have some optimism for the younger generation because as we talked about at the very beginning of this, you have kids come in with their own disposition, their own soul that has kind of its own mission. And I think a lot of these younger kids, they they look at what their parents have been doing, how they've been behaving, and they're disgusted.
Mhm.
They're angry and they're disgusted, and I think that's why this community is growing so much because you have a lot of younger people that discover the red pill, and it does resonate with them to a large extent because they haven't seen any kind of real masculinity, real boundaries in their own life. Like I don't know if this story is real because people make up this kind of stuff, but there was this Reddit story about this this couple who it's like the guy was like a cuck, right?
Mhm.
And so mom would sleep with these other guys. One guy in particular who I guess was like a family friend, and apparently like their teenage son found out about it, found like a videotape of it or something, and was absolute like hated his parents, hated them, hated the mother in particular, but also didn't have respect for the father. It was like you have to divorce mom.
Mhm.
You know, like that kid is gonna grow. He's gonna become conservative. He's not going to become more liberal. I think we've already reached like the peak degeneracy there. That it's not even. I don't even think it's exciting for people. I think they just do it because at this point they don't know what else is out there. It's like you have the ones who are reactionaries and you have the ones who just literally don't know a different path.
Mhm.
But that gives me cause of optimism because I think that they can be guided out of it, and they are
Yeah.
getting there.
There was the show in the early 2000s, the Osbournes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ozzy Osbourne, and they were talking to, the kids, and, in that show, they can kinda do whatever they want. I don't know how they old they might have been, like, early teens, late teens, I
Yeah.
don't remember, but they could drink, smoke, cuss, smoke weed, do whatever it was that they wanted to do, and it was like, "Well, how" they asked the question, "How do you rebel?" And it was like, I guess we'd go to church. You know what I mean? Like that is the rebellion.
Mhm.
I think we were at that point. It's like people see where like this lifestyle of libertinism leads. It's empty. It's s- eventually. So this is the problem with the church is that you say don't sin, don't sin. Well, why not? Well, it's like, well, sin is fun, right? Like sex is fun, right? Like don't tell them don't have sex because it's bad for you because it's like they want to have sex. It's fun. It feels amazing, right? It's like it's this drive that we have. Sin is fun. Like just don't let's like but there's consequences for that. Eventually your sin turns you into a slave. You become a slave to all of your feelings and your desires. Now you're trapped. Like
Mhm.
that's the story of the prodigal son. He went off and lived off his crazy lifestyle, and now he's feeding the pigs now, which he's in for Jews, like they don't eat pork, but then now he has to serve what he hates.
Yeah.
That's what it does to you. You can go ahead and have a good time, and that's how you get hooked, but eventually you're going to end up serving what you hate. You're going to be a slave to it. Like let's tell the full story. It is very fun. It is amazing. Yes, if you continue down that path though, like then you will be a slave. Do you want to, is that what you want for your life? No, I don't. Okay, well then you should be avoiding that. I think when I was listening to the podcast with Ty, he had Ty's dad had brought up about not doing drugs. Well, why? Because this is what happens if you do that. Well, let's start telling the story about porn. I think people are kind of are starting to do that. But why did Ty's dad not talk about it? Well, because it wasn't as prevalent. Like there was no Twitter where you click on a profile and be like, whoa, like I've clicked on a profile, like, whoa, I did not expect to see that. Like I said, it comes looking for you now. So
It really
this
does.
is this is you need to have the sex talk, you need to have the drug talk, you need to have the porn talk with your sons now. Like that our parents didn't have to because it wasn't an issue.
Mhm.
It is now.
And I think a lot of parents didn't know how to have the conversation themselves because, you know, they maybe they struggled with some maybe not identical issues,
Hmm.
but either it was too far removed from their awareness or they internally struggled and they didn't feel comfortable about it. I mean,
Hmm.
I think the people are very doomerish, and I make no qualms of saying I don't I think a lot of people are not gonna make it.
Hmm.
But I'm fundamentally very optimistic because I think that the people who are evolving so much spiritually that when you look at all this stuff, like when we talk about sin, we can talk about it from not like like a black and white, like don't do it, it's bad. If you do it, you should like create shame, which then feeds this cycle. We can talk about it as like in a more integrated fashion and say, yeah, I totally understand why you'd want to do it. But here are the consequences of it. This is like to be able to actually explain it and to not have be projecting our own shame onto our children because that's what a lot of parents do.
Hmm.
They're ashamed about something that's what the church does. Church and porn go hand in hand. And I know firsthand a lot of pastors struggle with
Hmm.
porn addictions.
Well, a pastor can hide a porn addiction. It's a lot harder to, hide, you know, doing drugs or
Yeah.
alcohol. So it's very private. But if we go back to what sin is an archery term for missing the mark.
Hmm.
So when you sin, you've missed the mark. Like that's it. Like you missed what God had for you. Okay, redirect. But the problem is you sin and then there's the shame like you were talking about and then so you keep on going down and it gets you further and further from
Yeah.
what the actual target was. And I think you know I think a lot of men in particular will have this thing. It's like, I don't want to be a hypocrite, right? So this is a conversation that was had in a lot of areas, but it's like, I don't want to like, say for me, for instance, right? The standard is a standard, whether I meet the standard or not, it's still the standard, brother. Like,
Mhm.
so I'm not the I'm not the I'm not the one that came up with the standard. It is what it is. So there's things that I've done that I'm gonna tell my kids not to do because a standard is a standard. It doesn't matter if it makes me a hypocrite or not. The
Mhm.
standard is a standard. I haven't been the best provider. I've, yelled and cussed and done things that I'm not proud of. But and that's why I think I love sports is because it's like, yo, man, you did what you were supposed to do. This play, this play, you got your ass kicked.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I need to be better.
Hmm.
That's life. It doesn't mean that you say, oh, don't you can't give feedback now because you got your ass kicked on a certain play. It's like, no, I coach players too now, and I'm gonna tell them the same thing. Does it? Oh, I didn't make that play either. Well, no, but this is a play that you need to make. This is just part of it. So, um, the shame thing is huge, and I think the shame is a trap too, because uh, say you did something you weren't supposed to do, and then you'll do it again because it's like, well, I did it already. So you can kind of continue down that path. I think that's dangerous. I think that's when we come back to like having grace for each other, because like people be like, oh, don't date a guy who's watched porn, or don't date a woman who's had sex. It's like, dude, these girls are being like, wet ass pussy was song of the year. Like, you don't think that's gonna do to something to like a girl who was like 6 or 7 years old and then she turns 18? That's those are the messages that she's heard.
Yeah.
And then you have boys who are exposed to porn at 8, 10 years old, and you don't think that he's gonna have seen porn, and you're gonna dismiss somebody who could have the potential to be a husband or a wife because you know obviously, like I said, the standard is a standard. I wouldn't want that for my kids, but just understanding like, yo, this is the culture that we're growing up. It's toxic.
I actually think it's more analogous to a wartime setting. And I think this is what guys have a hard time with, because in some ways this is, oh, we're comfortable and people are doing these things, and so I should judge them. But from a spiritual perspective, this is like the most intense war that we've been in for, I mean, certainly for our lives. I think for ages since World War
Mhm,
II, easily. And you have to look at people. If you look at people in that context, that they're being hit with nonstop propaganda, manipulation, satanic distortions, you're you know you're not going to, if you have compassion for yourself and you understand what you're going through, you have to have that for the other people too. You have to, otherwise you're kind of just feeding into the problem
mhm.
at the end of the day. I was on a podcast, I think, with Will Spencer, and we talked about this with, after World War II in Germany. I mean, you had, like, when the Soviets came into to Germany, I mean, I think it's estimated like 1,000,000 German women were raped. And, I'm not saying it happened to the Russians too when the Germans came over, not anywhere close to the same scale because of a lot of different reasons, partially the German military and, Nazi beliefs about this kind of stuff. But it a lot of those women who survived the war, you had men who had serious war traumas, saw people get blown up around them. Maybe they had serious injuries themselves. The women may have been raped. You know, they rebuilt. They didn't look at, that there had to be a certain level of compassion, like, our entire country's been destroyed. Like, I'm not gonna look at you and be like, "You're a whore,"
Mhm.
because this happened. Maybe you slept with a soldier to get some food,
Mhm.
It we have to think of it in some way, and that's similar now. And I'm not saying that this is like an excuse for people's behavior across the board, or that you should take some bimbo woman
Right.
who's like got a huge roster of notches and doesn't see any problem with it. But my issue with that is while I understand the disgust factor, my issue with that fundamentally is that that woman has no awareness of the fact that this was a bad thing and that it was a problem. Like, I'm very much in the red pill camp of like, don't, like, a woman's just like, oh yeah, I slept with 100 guys. Why does that matter?
Mhm.
It's like, you should know it matters. Don't pretend it doesn't matter. Now, are you going to move on from it? Are you going to acknowledge it? And are you going to learn from it and heal? Like, if you're going to get defensive, then it's obvious that you didn't, really internalize the lesson. You didn't really humble yourself, and that is what tells me you're maybe not long-term material.
Mhm. That's a good point, and I think it's like, yeah, we're not in wartime, but these women have been told for how long that having sex is empowering, right? That they've internalized this message for how long? Now, I'm not like you said, like I'm not saying to marry him, but just understand where that comes from. It makes sense. Like they've been groomed, and that's why I homeschool my kids. They don't have phones. It's like I want my kids to be kids for as long as possible.
Hmm.
And you know, me being the example, like my daughters are going to look to me for the standard for a husband. That's a big weight. Okay, well, I better make sure that I'm treating my wife in a manner that is going to be give them the best chance to find a good man. And when a bad man comes up, they can recognize it. It's like my daddy wouldn't do this. No, even though they might get the attention or whatever that they desire. Because again, I think that women do have this need to be desired. It does something for them. So the first person that gives them attention, it's like but my I know what my daddy gave me the attention, and so I know what good attention looks like, feels like, smells like, and you smell like a snake.
Mhm.
Um, but the spiritual attack to me, like that's it, brother. Like I'm 100% on the same page with you. Like they've been bombarded with like if you look at the music from the 80s, like I grew up, listening to music and it was like, "Oh baby, I love you. I want to marry you." And then in the 90s it was like, "Oh baby, I want you for the night." And then it became like, "Yo bitch, like I'm just trying to smash and you ain't shit. I'm trying to get, like the music has changed. And in the movies, like the one movie I can think of where it's like there's a good marriage that's like not a simp, or it's like it's 300 of all movies. It's the only movie I can think of. um,
Man.
but like the music is big and right, like so like you wonder why people are the way they are. You wonder like why dudes don't want to get married. It's like, dude, they've been listening to the same message, to be fair to them,
Yeah.
right? I didn't get that. Not only did I have the blessing of having loving parents, but the time I grew up in too was like it still hadn't changed. Like R. Kelly had kind of come on the scene, and it was just like, bumping and grinding. That seems wholesome now,
Yeah.
but it wasn't then,
Yeah.
right? But it's considered, it's almost wholesome now, which is funny when you look back and it's like, oh, that's, it was like, no man, this was degenerate, brother. Like, but it's gotten to the point where now this the slippery slope is real, and that's like one of the biggest realizations that we have. It's like, oh, it's a logical fallacy. It's like, shut up, nerd. Like, can't you see that, like, we're
Yeah.
doing crazy stuff now?
At this point, I mean, I think if you can't see it, you're deliberate. You're either like, I won't say it, but I think a lot of people who still are denying it, they're denying it because they know it's actually happening and they don't know what to do about it.
Hmm.
They're freaked out. Like it's like, because now when you bring this kind of stuff out up to people who are pretty liberal, okay, you have like the zombie, diehards, but most of them I've found are either saying, they're either agreeing, to an extent, like, yeah, I don't know, or they're just quiet because they know that this is really off the rails. The best they'll say is like, well, it's, just only this little stuff over here, and it's not spreading. It's like, yeah, it's spreading. I mean, we are just above the lowest rung in the ladder, and we're fast approaching it, which is pedophilia.
Hmm.
I mean, the the transgender stuff is, I mean, it's only even been like a year or two now since 2021. It's just like supercharged, shot ahead, and now it's so much in your face. I honestly, Joel, I know that it's probably similar for you, but being online every single day now, I think I'm getting hit with something like this.
Hmm.
Like, something's coming up in the feed. There's some new, and it's anyway.
It's
It's
like,
like time.
you've seen the playbook, right? It's
Yeah,
like, oh, you're running the same play again. And I think that's why I kind of came in with the let's build the marriage, because that's a foundational thing to me. Like, how are these people believing this? It's like, well, they came from unsettled families. Like, if I look at it, when I was growing up, all of my friends, everybody was married, and then as I got older, then divorce starts taking its toll. And so now we have a good, I don't know when the divorce laws came up, but like in the early 80s to mid 90s, like everybody that I knew, I saw around me, they were all, everybody was married still. And then so now you have families that have broken up. Like, what does that do to a kid?
yeah,
I was supposed to trust that my these two people were going to stay together and protect me, and now that's gone. Okay. The If we go to the Bible, one of my favorite stories is when Jesus gets tempted. how does the devil attack Jesus when he's in the wilderness? He says, "Is it true that you're the son of God?" He's attacking his identity.
Mhm.
So you have these kids who are growing up with like no identity, no sense of family. Like that's if I was a predator, right? What do they try to do? Like they're trying to separate predators going to try and separate like the new babies from the herd so they can attack them, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you do. It makes it easy pickings. That's why like like did I really want to be talking about marriage? Not really, but it's like, well, if your family is good, that's good for my family.
Mhm.
If my neighbor's family is good, that's good for my family. Like let's get back to like taking control of what we can control of. I can't control a lot of things, but I can control the kind of man that I am and the kind of husband that I am and the kind of father that I am. And I'm the best father when I'm a good husband.
Mhm.
Like I've never seen a great husband be a bad father. It's just I've never seen it. Great husbands, they always make good fathers. Yeah, okay, but you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
but I've never seen the
Strong
opposite.
correlation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Joel, I think that's a good point to end it on. In 2023, being a father, being a husband, building up marriages, it's a revolutionary act in 2023. And you're doing it, man. So let the audience know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter. That's where I do most of my stuff at the Joel Lopez. I've got a podcast that's kind of on hold for now, so don't worry about that. But for your listeners, if they want to hop on a call with me, just DM me. Thanks, Pat. I'll be happy to talk to them about their marriage and any issues. I'll be happy to give them a free 30-minute call if that's what they want to do. If they enjoyed this interview. But yeah, for the most part, I'm on Twitter. I'm on there. All the time because I enjoy it. I meet people like you. It's to me, it's like being at school and you see your friends. It's like, yo, what's up, Pat? What's
Yeah,
going
yeah.
on, man? Like that's kind of how I treat it. So I like to joke. I like to mess around, but marriage and faith. That's kind of where my heart's at.
Well, Joel, thank you so much. I'll have all that stuff in the link description below for guys. And I'll see you on Twitter. I'll see you at school.
Yeah, for sure, man. Take care.